And happy holidays. Welcome to the Albany Pine Bush Preserve Commission's quarterly board meeting. My name is Keith Kurtz. I'm the regional director for DEC's Region 4, and I also serve as the board chair. As is customary, I'd like to go around the table and introduce the executive director of the commission as well as the rest of the board members. So to my left, the executive director is Chris Hauger. Continuing around the table, Mike McLaughlin from Albany County. Representing TNC, Jessica Apni Mahar. And then we have Harvey Alexander, citizen rep. Steve Rice, citizen rep. From the city of Albany, Brad Glass. Continuing around, supervisor, town colony, Paula Mahan. We have the supervisor of the town of Gilliland, Peter Barber. And we have another citizen rep, John Bruss. And another citizen rep, Nancy Pearson. So, welcome everybody. The first order of business is to consider the minutes from our last board meeting on September 20th. Can I have a motion? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, so if there's anybody from the public who would like to come up and speak.
I'm always from the public. That's what I gotta be. Good morning. I just wanted to make one announcement. The Friends of the Pine Bush, with the idea from the staff, came up with the idea that we would do a traveling exhibit, and we would take the best of the last 4 years of the photo exhibit. And so we put that together. It spent the summer at the Pine Hills branch of the Albany Public Library. It's right now at the Gilliland Library, and it will be there through January. So that's pretty cool. And it's going to Colony Library in February. We'll put that up February 1st, and on the, what's the date? On the 12th, we'll have a reception for all the artists. So it's like the best of the best. And I think it kind of makes the whole thing really neat that after 5 years, we've collected 500 or 600 pictures. And then if you try to put a picture of the pine bush and you look at everything and say, okay, well, there's a little of this and a little of that, and there's this snake and this flower and this plant, and these are all important. And now we're building that up so that we can kind of almost do a guidebook as you walk through. So visit Gilliland right now or Colony in February, and we'll be somewhere later, like Bethlehem in summer.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, very good. We'll move into the reports. I have nothing significant to report this quarter. So, does anybody from the board have anything they'd like to report? Okay. Turn it over to you, Chris.
Okay. I'll follow up on Richard on his report from the Friends. The jury photo exhibit that you see here, this is the 5th annual one. It was sponsored again by the Friends, also co-sponsored by LOB. And this was a project spearheaded by Jackie Citroniti, who we're going to hear from later. Thank you, Jackie. And Blake Etchison. She helped as well. She's on vacation, I believe. Again, like the last few years, these are for sale. A number of them have already been sold. But if you're interested, there's tags by them, and you can purchase them at the front desk. Cheap plug right there. But they're nice holiday presents, except that you have to wait until the exhibit's done by the end of February. You can take a picture and you can send it. Thanks.
They get a nice card, Chris.
They do.
With
They get a nice
with a
card.
picture of the picture.
That's right. Thanks. That's right. Also following up from the Friends, in your update, which follows the draft minutes, there's a number of things that the Friends have helped with this year and supported, not this year, this quarter. Museum Store Sunday in the Discovery Center gift shop, they helped with refreshments for that. They helped again with this when we had the opening event for this jury photo exhibit where we had just about 70 people. They've helped with Teen Science Cafe, a meeting that's also spearheaded by another staff member, Grace Barber. Grace. 3 science lecture series presentations, and they supported the stipend for our full environmental education interns. So thanks to the Friends. Another cheap plug, if you're not a member of the Friends, they're a nonprofit that helps support our work. Membership starts at $15. I'm sorry,
We'll take any.
joining. So if you're interested, we have membership applications, not membership, joining applications.
Can't say that anymore.
I know I can't. I won't belabor this because we've got a busy meeting, but a couple other things jumping out. We had another record year in prescribed fire. We burned just about 242 acres this year. Long-term goal that we've had since we started this fire program in 1991 was to burn at least 200 acres a year, and we've hit that goal a number of years in a row. And that's a lot of effort, a lot of thanks to Tyler Briggs, our fire management specialist, but also other staff here participating in those burns. We did our fall migration bird banding this year, the 11th year. We had 1,006 birds from 68 species between the end of August and the end of October. That's pretty significant. That's a lot of birds. And that's also spearheaded by Conservation Director Mr. Gifford. And just a couple other things. Lupin Fest is our biggest public event, as you know. We do that every year. But in addition to that, we do two other large free public events. We do Smoky Bear Day, that's on Columbus Day. This year was a rainy day, but we still had about 280 people. And Night at the Night at the Discovery Center, which is modeled after the movie Night at the Museum. Second year in a row, we did that the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We had about 200 people. That was a fun event, lots of activities, live wildlife. Dr. Alexander and his friends were dressed in period clothes. No musket firing this year, but it was well attended. We had a good time. So, Harvey, thanks for attending again. I'll leave it at that. I think I'm off the Christmas card. Okay. That's it.
Okay. Next, we'll hear from Neil Gifford, Technical Committee.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
I have our 55th Technical Committee quarterly update. The quarter's been slow. There was really, up until last week, there was only one new project that was in the town of Colony in a non-protection area on the north side of Albany Street. There are a couple of warehouses, and that's reflected in this report. But I did want to take a second and update you all on the application we received last week, the week before, from the town of Gilderland and Crossgates. Well, the other thing to highlight, the reason I have this nice stack here, if anybody wants to read them, the 2018 Habitat Restoration Compliance Report from the City of Albany is in. Finish that by the end of the year, as well as their Wetland Compliance Report for the Army Corps is in. So I'm working my way through those. But overall, the Habitat Restoration Project in the landfill looks great. Definitely moving in the right direction. The second handout I have for you is a close-up. So everybody, I think, knows where Crossgates Mall is, but on this map it's relatively small. It's the southeastern end of the study area. And I have a copy for each of you. It's not in the quarterly report yet because we have the technical committee has not met yet to review this project, but in the news, I thought you would appreciate the opportunity to hear a little bit about it. Crossgates is proposing in the pink area on that map, which is partial protection area 57 in the management plan. They're proposing 222 apartments consisting of 5 buildings. 2 of them would be 5 stories tall. 2 of them would be 5 stories tall, and 3 of them would be 2 stories tall. And I went to the planning board last week and I wanted to give you all some context on this. It's in a partial protection area 57 in the town of Gilderland. But the context here matters. This is the Crossgates Hill. Here, the blue area on that map is what DEC calls the Crossgates Carnegie Butterfly Preserve. Effectively, when they did their theater expansion back in, 96, 97, the stormwater management permits that the department provided for that expansion effectively protected the Crossgates Hill and this corridor that extends northwest toward the preserve. And that's all occupied with carnival butterflies, frosted elephant butterflies, eastern hognose snakes, SGCN birds. And that connects to TNC land, as well as these two properties with the Albany Catholic Diocese and the Daughters of Sarah, where we have management agreements that allow us to kind of build this connection. The City of Albany and the applicants, property owners in the city have been great at working with us to help build a connection so that we can connect the Cross Gates Butterfly Hill to the preserve. At this point, our potential concerns are the fact that it's a full build out of a partial protection area where we typically like to see at least 50% of that protected, but also I wanted to point out on this map, the green block here is full protection area 62. And that is a beautiful dune with pine strip oak barrens and all kinds of great stuff on it. So you'll be hearing more about this project more than likely over the next several weeks and months. So I wanted to just give you a heads up and some context on that application. Brett?
Who owns the full protection area?
Pyramid Corporation owns pretty much everything here. So they own 57 and they own pretty much all of 62. They actually own, I didn't realize that, the Atria nursing home. If you look at the county's GIS site now, it's phenomenal. There you get all that ownership information. But yeah, so Pyramid owns all of that. So that's the Cross Gates project. I'll leave it at that. Or Chris will get the hook out. Any questions on any of that?
Have they addressed what they're going to do, or put out anything yet?
They sent us their initial application, their preliminary application, so it's not even before the town appeal going yet for any approvals. They just did their sketch plan with the planning board last week, and now they'll go through the process of secret review.
And that document is the preserve mentioned at all?
The preserve is mentioned, but even in their long form, they don't mention that's next to, substantially contiguous to a natural landmark. Apparently they did some sort of cursory endangered species review, which wasn't included in the application I received. But again, and endangered species, the commission of course will comment as a non-regulatory agency, but really that's up to the DEC and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're technically the only ones that can determine if habitat is actually occupied with endangered species.
What was the discussion at the planning board meeting tonight?
Long?
Oh, that's good. I mean, it's not
Yes.
there.
There were lots of residents had questions and comments about the proposal. But at this point, the applicant was just kind of giving the town and the planning board a heads up, here's what they're thinking of doing on that piece of property to initiate the review process. And we have a technical committee scheduled, I believe, it's January 11th, to review that application in full.
And is that parcel zone for that type of development?
It is, all of this, actually including the hill, went through, it's spread across.
Transit-oriented development.
Transit-oriented development district, TOD.
Okay.
That's the term that I keep hearing, TOD, Transit-oriented development district.
Okay.
This is the CDTA's busiest hubs. So they're going to put a transit center there at Cross Gates. But all of that was rezoned to be consistent in that district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Lisa Anthony with the financial report.
We have our financial statement of financial activities. This represents a 7-month fiscal year through October 31st. On the revenue side, we have dues and contributions. These are on budget through the month of October. Grants income is at 88% of budget, and this is directly related to expenses, and this is typically lower in our fiscal quarter of the year. It will be higher January through March. Mitigation fees are slightly over budget, and this is due to increased understanding and bill. Lease revenue is on budget for the year, and other budget is $3,000 higher, and this is due to an increase in merchandise sales and clothing in the shop. So total revenue came in at 91% of budget for the month of October. Moving on to expenses, personnel and fringe are under budget, and this is due to a large benefit payment, which we made in November for the retirement system, and this will even out over time. Travel and training is under budget due to the timing of actual expenses across all departments, and we most likely will end up a little bit under budget due to conferences that have not been attended because they're too far away this year. Contractual is $126,000 under budget for October, but we spent $108,000 in November, and this will catch up over time. Communications is at 90% of the budget, and this is due to the timing of printing projects and postage for mailings, which will occur in March. Occupancy is at 61% of budget, and this is due to projects like in timing, specifically exhibit repair. Supplies and equipment are at 76% of budget across all departments, hardware and software, fire and PPE equipment, and typically this will catch up in February and March. Other expenses are under budget, and this is due, again, to the timing of expenses. We will end up a little bit under for insurance, and professional journals have to be published yet, so this will catch up through March. So overall, our revenue expenses came in both under budget for the month of October at 91% and 76%, giving us a higher operating net income of $294,000. Any questions on it? Okay. Our statement of net assets for October. The assets side, cash increased $113,000 due to considerable spending in the first 3 quarters of the year. This will catch up January through March. Conservation and reserves remain the same. Grants receivables increased. This is due to money owed from DEC for July through September, and this has been paid. Accounts receivable increased due to the increase in mitigation funds owed, and this also has been paid. Inventory increased slightly due to the purchases in the gift shop. Prepaid expenses are 0, and this is due to the timing of year-end expenses that fall into our next fiscal year. You will see this on our audit report for June. Investments decreased $43,000 due to a negative performance in all 3 funds. Capital assets increased due to conceptual design work for the Discovery Center grounds project. And deferred outflows remain the same. And this is the reporting requirement for GASB 68 and 71. And this will change on our January report for our March meeting. Liabilities, accounts payable, and accrued expenses decreased. This is due to the repayment of funds for our stewardship projects. Deferred revenue decreased slightly to the DEC advance being utilized. And New York pension liability remains the same. Again, this will change for our March meeting based on our January report. So total liabilities decreased $42,000 due to DEC advance funds being utilized. Net assets, capital assets increased as referenced above. $35,000 for conceptual design. Reserved assets remain the same, and unreserved assets increased $216,000, giving us a total increase of net assets of $252,000, which $295,000 is our NOI, and a decrease in investments of $42,000. Any questions on that? All right. On to investments. All 3 funds had a slightly negative performance. The Discovery Center endowment had a negative 1.23 and a 0.54 loss. The reserve fund had a negative performance of 0.02%. So our investments had a negative performance of $43,000 through October. We just received our November statement, and we had a $15,000 gain. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move along to the action items. The action items to discuss. Chris, you want to start off with the action item number A?
Sure. So action item A, this is a revision of the current fiscal year's budget, 18-19. This adds $150,000 to that, it adds $150,000 in revenue from a successful grant that we got from the U.S. Forest Service for wildfire risk reduction. We've gotten this grant before. We actually are putting an application in today for next year. And we use this in preparation for burning areas. We use it for chemical treatments, and we use it for mowing, and we match it with our fire treatments. So we got $150,000 thanks to a grant that was put in by Tyler and Neal last year. Submitted around this time last year. We were notified and got the funding, or the funding became available in September. We're actually spending it now because there's no snow. So there's a revenue source of 150 added, and then there's an expense under contracts. That's a good one. Any questions?
Okay, have a motion to consider the revised operating budget? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Next, we have the fiscal year 1920 annual plan.
So, as you recall, over the last several years now that we've been recognized as a state authority, we pass our annual plan and our budget for fiscal year 1920, which starts April 1 of 19. We do that now in December because we have to upload a 5-year budget to the reporting site for the state, Public Authority Reporting Information System, Harris. So the annual plan is first and is followed by the budget. The annual plan for 1920, I gave you both so you can see the changes that we did. We do this as a team with the staff. We remove things, we add things. There's nothing really significant. The one thing that's probably important to point out is we brought Shelley Bischoff. Remember, she was the consultant that helped us develop the audience development plan, the vision strategy, and the focus on constituent-centered focus. She came back and met with the director's team in April, and one of the things that we ended up coming out with that discussion is modifying how we approach our operating plan, which is part of this annual plan, it's part of the audience development plan, it comes from the management plan, we got a lot of plans, but the operating plan is what we do internally and how we set our objectives and how our departments work forward. So one of the big things is getting the message out and using it in our day-to-day conversations that the preserve is not done. Most people think the Pine Bush Preserve is done. There's 3,300 acres protected. Well, there's over 2,000 acres left. And that's in our plan, in our vision or in our protection vision, but it's not being articulated. And it's something that we're doing more and more now, getting it in communications and making sure the public and people just recognize that there's more to do. So that's kind of upfront. There's nothing other really significant, and I can answer any questions you might have. Okay.
Okay, so have a motion to consider this annual plan? Thank you. Next, yeah. All in favor? And the last action item is the 1920 operating budget.
Okay, so the 1920 budget, you have this in your packet too. I'll make the assumption that you at least scanned it. Others have studied it fully. The audit committee went through this in detail as part of our conversation last Friday. Starting off with revenue, the primary change in revenue is mitigation fees. Mitigation fees from the landfill continue to drop, and they're probably now at the point, I would speculate, where they probably will not drop any further. So last year we had budgeted about $200,000 as income. This year we're budgeting around $150,000, which is $37.5 a quarter. And my guess is that it will probably stay that way until for the continued life of the landfill, which is 2026. Is that right, Brad? Is that right?
Not very.
It's 2026. Because the landfill has slowed intake significantly, basically add a little bit of life to the landfill, or actually quite a bit of life to the landfill. So the budget, the expenses basically reflect that we've reduced that $50,000 coming in. There are things that we did have to increase. Starting at the top under expenses, salaries and benefits, we built in a 4% increase. Depending on what the governor does, we follow that for management confidential employees. We reduced legal fees by about $15,000, contractual by about $23,000. Other modest increases are in the community engagement / advertising events and PR. That's because we kind of built it up last year. There's about $14,000 less in fire equipment needs because those will actually be purchased at the end of this fiscal year. There's an increase in some occupancy things. For example, these projectors are 12 years old. These are going to be replaced. These are completely obsolete, and the bulbs are hard to find. And the bulbs are exorbitantly expensive for what they are. Bulbs today barely burn out, and they're very inexpensive. Flooring in the office suite, again, 12 years old, with field staff that come in day in and day out. Carpeting takes a beating. It's lasted pretty well, but we're going to look into replacing that. And then balancing the entire building when it comes to the HVAC system to make it more efficient, and that'll end up in monetary savings anyways. So overall, there's a slight decrease in the operating budget from this current year to next year. Any specific questions? I can answer. Steve?
Well, I wasn't on the summary pages on the Paris statement.
Yeah, that's.
Have you got there yet?
Nope. So that's the budget. So then the Paris statement follows that. That's the 5-year that we have to come up with, that we develop. So there's, well, if you look, turn the page. So there's last year's actuals, the current year estimated, and then next year. So that's why we adopt this budget. And then there's a proposed 3 more years going out. So that's the 5-year budget that we have to provide as part of the reporting to Paris.
Oh, it just has to do with the one line item that jumps up and stays high in terms of other employee benefits. I don't know what that's about. It doesn't say, I couldn't find it in any of the other tables.
Good question. So in executive session, we're going to talk about that specifically and how that relates to Paris and personnel and things like that. And we as the audit committee, I'm not on the audit committee. The audit committee has talked about this extensively in its last 2 meetings, and that's going to be the topic of discussion for executive session. And your questions should be answered. I was hoping somebody would ask that. So, any other questions?
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the 1920 operating budget?
It's hard for me to vote without at least hearing what the explanation for that is. Is it possible to
Yep.
make a vote until after the executive session?
Yeah, we could come out of session and then vote on it. You want to do that?
Okay, great. All right, so we'll do like that after executive session. So now we're going to move into presentations. Okay, the first is a presentation on the Truax Burial Ground Restoration. Jackie
Citrinity, yes, all right. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Jackie. Hi, everybody. I am very honored today to have been part of this project and to present to you this morning. I'll be introducing different people throughout the presentation, and if you have any questions, you can either ask during or after, whatever you feel comfortable with. This all started early spring, but I'm talking today about the Truax burial site. For those of you who don't know exactly where it is, if you head down Kings Road, actually north on Kings Road, cross over Morris, the marker itself is about a quarter mile up on the left-hand side, and the actual site is on the right-hand side. And it used to be very well hidden. Currently, right now, it's not, but that's okay. And I didn't want to go any farther in the presentation because I have a lot of people to thank. If you took any one of these out, the project would not have happened. So I really want to say, and I'll elaborate more on all these, and especially the person who did the work, and he came today, and I'll introduce him as well. The Friends group, which a lot of their financial support, Backyard Fence, I'll explain what they did, Cassell Rental, Jesse and Luke and Sean and their staff did a tremendous amount of work out there, and Chris helped me get over a lot of hurdles, and the education team for all their support as well. So speaking of education team, we knew that the Truax burial site was out there, but we had never been. We didn't find it, and we all ventured out early spring. And this is what we found, and it's really hard to see. There's 2 gravestones here, and there was one here and one leaning against another tree, and it was so overgrown. We were pretty much up the chest. I'm not used to being over my head in vegetation. I'm sure a lot of the science staff and stewardship staff is used to it, but we were hiked out there. We also found a cool blowdown while we were out there from Microburst. So we got to the site and we said, this is great, found it, so excited. And upon walking out, I had an idea. I was like, we gotta do something. We gotta protect it. Whether it's through fence, we gotta restore it, you know, and that started my brain going. So after many months of web search, phone calls, emails, and as I said, Chris's help, we got approval that the gravestones are ours and that we could move forward because a lot of the information was that if there's a living family member, you can't touch it. So, and spoke with Joel about how we would work around it for management and fire, and then got approval that I could move forward with at least fencing. So I decided to do a proposal to the Friends group first, and of course their wonderful, generous financial support as always, they approved it. So this was the fence that I had sought out to put around the gravestones. And then I decided I wanted to do it through a local company. And they are right down the street on Albany Street, backyard fence, Jerry and Melissa. And I'm not going to cry when I talk about this, but I decided to go see them personally. And I walked in, and I was talking with Jerry, and I said, I just talked with you via email, but I wanted to put a face with a name, and you know, we're looking to enclose the gravestones. And he says, Melissa, get out here. And she comes out, and she sees my shirt. And she says, you're from the Pine Bush? And I said, yes. And she starts crying. And I said, oh no, yeah, I wasn't sure how to and she's like this, and her husband's like, oh no, are you doing this again? And I was kind of still not sure what was going on, and she said, give me a minute. And she said, our kids have grown up coming to the Pine Bush, and mine's going to college this summer. So I said, oh, I know how that feels, and it was very nice that she shared that, and within seconds, Jerry said, we're going to donate all the fencing. So they donated all the fencing for the gravesite. The summer came, we had a lot of education programs. Jesse had a lot of work, but Jesse's crew started work in September. A lot of clearing. And I was determined to want to get these gravestones cleaned or somehow get them restored. So I gave one last attempt, called the Albany Rural Cemetery, and they, within minutes, hooked me up with Chris, who is here today. Chris, would you like to stand? This is Christopher White. He's the one that did all the work that you're going to see in the future slides, and he actually put a little video together for us as well of his work. But in talking with Chris the first day, he said, I told him the two that were leaning to were broken off. He said, probably the bottoms are there if you want to take a probe and go out and see. So I said, okay, I'll take a probe, and Jesse got me a probe, and I went out and I just started going all around this whole area. It literally was like a needle in a haystack, and I could not find anything. But Chris met us a couple days later, and he found them in like 10 minutes. So leave it to the experts. He found two bases that from the broken off stones, and he also found the base of a footstone, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is the cleared area that Jesse and his crew, it's pretty amazing. Chris started first by setting these stones upright. He then made full bases for each of the gravestones and the footstone here. Footstones, I did a little research, were made not only to delineate where a grave ends, but also to put more information if you want about the person. So then Chris, and if anybody, I did write down all the products that Chris used, but if you have any questions about that, Chris is here to answer them more specifically. Then Chris put the broken one back together through using an epoxy. So here he's got it all clamped and glued. And then he started to clean them. So he used a product, D2 biological solution. This is the before, and that's the after. Isn't that amazing? So he completed by putting everything in place. And this is what it looks like completed. And you can see that huge, there's more than one of those trees that Jesse had to take down. So Jesse and his crew, there's a lot of trees in there. And by Chris restoring all of the gravestones, he was able to now get the information off of the stones. And Jesse, I'll plug Jesse here further, he found an awesome website, stick it in down here, and I went and researched. This was the husband and the wife, Isaac and Mary, and look how old they lived to. I was really shocked at that in 1800 to live that old. These are 2 of their 13 children. So they had 13, and those are 2 of them. So, and this is Isaac Truax, when I looked up, and Catherine. So once they finished with that, Jesse was able to put the fence around the stones. This is from one viewpoint, this is from another, and there's a gate here so we can enter. And then I'd like to play the video for you that Chris put together so nicely, and it does have some cool music. For Chris. It was the week that we got the 7 inches of snow. So he was working really hard and really fast to get everything done before the snow came. And Jesse was working really hard and fast to get the fence in. And Chris even took a day off from work in his own vacation time to finish that for us. So I just really wanted to say thank you very much. But that's not where the story ends. Because when Jesse was digging for the fence, he found another gravestone. And this actually says John Schoolcraft Truax died June 10th, 1811 at age 13 years old. So we couldn't read the months in 29 days. So he immediately sent it to Chris, and Chris said, where there's one, there's more. So Chris is committed to come back in the spring, grid out the entire area and do a full search for us. So, and none of that again would happen without the support and financial support of the Friends, because since the fencing got donated, we were able to hire Chris to do that. So, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for me, Jesse, Chris? Jesse, did everything
limestone, and if so, is there going to be a weathering problem now that you've taken off the?
The two stones that were upright, they are both marble, and the two that were broken, that were laying on the ground, they were both sandstone. And the only thing that I removed was biological growth, mold, lichens, etc.
You know, from
There's-
things like acid rain, sometimes those actually protect the, if it's.
The acid rain will deteriorate
Yeah.
and damage the stone if left on there. Actually, that's been on there for years and years, and we, bought the stones longer life with removing all that. There's a lot of those stones. One of the stones, unfortunately, the whole inscription was pretty much missing on one of the stones. And that was because the stone was going through what's known as delamination. The stones, they were all compressed, and when water got underneath one of the layers, it pretty much flaked off. And there was a lot of delamination still occurring where what was left of the inscription could have been lost. And what I did was I purchased a specific product, and I tried to put as much of that product, it's a lime-based mortar, put it inside, in between the crack, the crease, so that it solidifies and makes it a little bit harder, because if you had come up and just went like that on the front of the stone, there's a strong chance that that piece would flake right off. So at least this way here, it should be more stable. And all of the cracks were infilled, so that there should stop water from penetrating and getting in there and causing further damage.
He's looking at finding all 13.
Jake, do they know where the inn was? Where the property was in the inn, or that's?
Yep, we do. It's down the road farther from the area, my understanding. Thank you so much.
Hello again. Our second presentation is by two PhDs from the New York Natural Heritage Program. Dr. Tim Howard, who's the Director of Science, and Dr. King Conley. He's a spatial ecologist, and we've been working with them over the last year or so doing a new ecological mapping project for not just the preserve, but the 13,000 acre study area. And they're going to basically give you an overview of that project.
Well,
This is Amy and this is Tim.
thank you and good morning. So we'd like to talk about a project that we worked on with Neil to get together some sort of a revisit and a new mapping effort for the Pine Bush to help with Neil's management activities. And there's sort of two phases, two parts to it, and it starts and so we'll break up into. I'll talk about part one. Amy will talk about phase two. And I'll try to go quickly because she has some much more interesting things and cool things to talk about. But we also dive into the weeds a little bit, and I'll try to show a lot of pretty pictures, but also just to give you a little warning that we're going to dive down into sort of the science of it and of the mapping. But also it's pretty exciting and pretty fun to do too. So please, if you have any questions or anything, happy to stop and go over things. But there were two goals to the project. Was to create a new land cover map for the Pine Bush, for the whole study area, and then use that land cover map, of which a few iterations have been done in the past. So this is sort of using new satellite data, let's make a new one so we can compare with previous ones. And with that land cover map, create a natural community map based on that. And you may think, oh, that sounds like one and the same, but there's actually subtle differences and distinctions between them, and it really helps, having both of these products help us with management actions and help us think about what we want to do here. So you'll definitely understand the distinction between these as we go on. All right, so I'll dive into this, creating a new and cover map, and then Amy will cover that phase 2. We have our data sources going into this were actual people. Neil had some folks go on the ground and get out there and say, I'm standing under a pitch pine, I'm standing with some scrub oaks, I'm standing here getting their GPS location, so we call those the ground truth points, the locations where I know someone told me exactly what's here on the ground, as well as satellite imagery from 2017, from 3 dates in 2017, January, May, and September. And that's actually kind of neat to have those 3 dates. And so our goal is to say, what did the preserve look like in 2017? So I'm sure you'll be able to go there and say, no, we've done some work since then, and it's different now. But that's the point, right? It's different now, and we're focusing on 2017. So here are those ground truth points. We had some from actually the previous effort from 2014, and I could double check them and say, yep, that tree is still there, I'll consider that. I know what that tree is now based on these points. And you can see places where folks went throughout the preserve. Over 1,000 of those locations that I can use, and I can look carefully at aerial imagery and say, yep, that tree's still there, or yep, that tree is still there. I'll use that point to help tell me what's on the ground. And then the imagery, these are 2 satellites, one called WorldView 2 and one called GeoEye. And the WorldView 2 has lots of different visual spectra, 8 bands that it collects information on, and it brings it down to half a meter. So what's that? So a square, a picture is from the satellite is this big on the ground. It's amazing, the resolution, as well as GeoEye. So we're working at these half-meter pixel resolutions. It's really, really fine resolution, which is really cool because you can see individual trees. Here is what I was working with. So here's January, a color infrared image in January for the pine bush. And actually, so because it's by color infrared, we mean we use 3 bands to make green look bright red. And so you can see the conifers, the pine trees are in red here, and all the deciduous trees are going to be this more grayish colors. And here's another example. Here's May. Things are starting to redden up, and we're starting to green up, so we see a lot more red. Mowed lawn is very, very bright green, right? So there's the golf course, and so we have some bright greens as well. And here is everything's very green in September, so it's very dark, so you can't see that very well. But just some examples of the satellite imagery we have. And I could take those separate ones and create indices, which actually is also very useful for telling you what the condition is, what it look like on the ground. One of them is called the greenness index, and I just zoomed in. Here we are at the Discovery Center, okay, and here's some of our bigger roads. And so we just look at the spot at the Discovery Center. I have this 3 index I just give you examples for. The greenness index, NDVI, the normalized difference vegetation index, looks a little different. And another one called the normalized difference water index that looks a little different. So I can use those bands to create these things and help tell me, what am I really looking at? That looks, this looks red, but why does it look red? And is that different from the other indices? And I can use that in the modeling that we're doing next. So my goal is to model these different types so that I can I use computers to tell me what these types are so I can predict them across the landscape. And I have a simple example here. For example, if I said, I can tell where the water is, and I can ask the model, I can say, model, this is what water looks like in those signatures. Give me a prediction of water throughout the entire study area. Here it is. So the light blue is probably not water, low probability of water. The darker blue is very high probability of water. And then I can take that and say, okay, let's cut it at some level. This is all the water on the landscape. Rather than me going out, looking at an image and saying, and clicking around the circle, or clicking on a polygon, I get the computer to do it. It gives me a prediction of water. Let's do the same for rooftops and impervious surface, right? And roads, do the same thing. I asked the computer, I told the computer where a few of the rooftops and roads are, and then the computer said, okay, the probability that this rooftop is very low here in the middle of the preserve, but very high at cross gates and things. And you end up with a map. Now I just merged my water parts and my rooftops and roads parts, and that's, I'm on my way to make my classification, right? I've got 2 of my classes done. So here are all the ones I did individually like that. I said, okay, I tell the computer where the mowed lawn is, mowed lawns are, and then have the computer predict out the mowed lawns and then add it to my bin here. Same thing with these guys. So each of those times, I would only do it within the remaining part of area. So now I've got all of this predicted out, and I can use it, they call it a mask, to give me only the white part left. So now I'm going to say, only within the white part, what am I going to do now? What do I do with the rest of this? And I'm trying to predict the difficult ones. So where are the red maples? Where are the aspens? Where are our herbaceous barrens, sort of the non-shrubby, non-tree barrens? Where's the pitch pine? Where's the white pine? So now I take all of this stuff together and ask the computer to say, try to discern between pitch pine and white pine. That's hard. Try to discern between black locust patches and oak patches. That's hard too. But we did the best we could. We worked with what we had, and we ended up with this final product that is that has all those classes, started as well, starting with water, going all the way down to our locust and our scrub oak patches and things like that. And so this is useful as it is. This is sort of that land classification or the cover type classification. But every little circle in there, I mean every single little tree, because where pixels are this big and it takes many of those to make a tree, this pulls out every single little tree. So you have your little crown, the trees there on the landscape on this map, which is pretty neat and pretty exciting, but also maybe less useful because Neil can't say, this is my pitch pine oak leaf parent, because I'm just telling him where all the pitch pines are. So phase 2.
So phase 2 is trying to take that land cover map and make a map of natural communities, which is not normally how the Heritage Program maps natural communities. I'm normally actually not involved at all in mapping natural communities. That is our community ecologist, Greg Edinger, who also worked with us on this project to work with me to try to figure out how do we take a land cover description of an area and translate that into a community description as opposed to being on the ground and look at the understory and the overstory. So what we decided to work with is trying to describe the neighborhood around every pixel. Because the strength of the data that we have is that you have 0.5 meter cell resolution, which I never get to work with, so this was really fun. And so instead of focusing on the trees, we were trying to find a way to describe, the forest. What's around this pixel? Is it in a forest? Is it a tree in an open habitat? And so a way that you can do that, because this was all in raster data, is to do what's called a roving window or neighborhood analysis, which for every pixel in the pine bush, or in this case it was the preserved vision area. We didn't do the entire pine bush for this part of the project. We said, okay, in every 100 meter circle or a 10 meter circle, how dense is the wetland around there? How dense is the grassland? And that gives us an identification of kind of the context for that area. So here, because we have 0.5 meter fixed data, I'm going to zoom in to show you kind of an example of how it was done. And I picked purely because I liked the name and because it had a wetland in it, Frizzle Fry, one of the properties. To sort of orientate you, because I spent a lot of time looking at this map, and I understand what the colors mean. The purple, this kind of light blue, this bright pink purple, these are the wetlands, the herbaceous wetlands that Tim described that he pulled out. This sort of dark purple, that is tree oak. Yellow, red are maples, aspens. The red is the locust-ish. This sort of teal, that's the pitch pines. And this orange is scrub oak. And this light green is grassland. So if you're looking in this area, this has got sort of a a grassland open area here with pitch pines and scrub oaks. There's denser forest in here that's got a lot of oak, and in here we have these wetlands. And so depending, does this have a little pointer?
Yeah.
I don't know what question.
We'll just use
I think it's the red line,
so-
it's the red line
the red line.
on the top, on the face of it.
Ah, perfect. So, for some of these, some of these classes, there's a with this level of imagery, you can get a very clear line between habitats. So you can kind of see the border between the forest and the open area. And in this case, the border between the wetland. So for those who might, this is a circle with a 10-meter diameter. So that's a really small neighborhood, but that's pretty much kind of, that gives you a really tight boundary. So when you're looking, we did say, give me the average wetland within 10 meters. It's going to be a very sort of tight area and just kind of outlining the wetland for you. As opposed to a much bigger neighborhood, this is 100-meter, 100 cells. This is a 50-meter diameter circle. This is sort of a bigger window. And this is 15 and a 25, and you'll see on kind of on the next slide the different impact of kind of how big of an area do you look at and what that tells you when you're trying to sort of figure out what the community is like. So for here is that same picture with just the percent wetland in that 10-meter radius in purple. So if it's 0, there was no wetland within 10 meters. And remember, sort of here was the wetland to begin with, and it just barely skirts the edge. So this allows us to basically pull out the wetland and maybe the little trees inside the wetland, which aren't herbaceous wetland, but they're not a forest themselves, so we want to sort of include them in our wetland habitat. And so here's the 10-meter circle. Here's just to remind you kind of the size of the area, that's the window that it looks at. And this is how you can kind of pull out where our wetland communities are. And you want a pretty fine, tight boundary because it's a pretty distinct line in the habitat. We can also kind of look at groups of things. So we were trying to figure out the open areas from the forested areas. We might say, okay, do you have grass or bare soil or scrub oak species that exist in open areas? And this shows you sort of this denser area where you have more grass and open area. And that dense forested part has very little. And you can sort of see the consequence of only looking really in the immediate habitat is you don't get the forest in some of these areas. It starts to outline the trees. So we can increase it. Scrub oak's an important, because it's an important species for these habitats. We want to give its influence a little bit longer, so it extends out for 25 meters from any scrub oak. You can see where these individual trees versus these denser stands of scrub oak. And here we want all forest species, so any tree species, the aspens, maples. We just want to find where's your forest cover. So here you can see where there's pretty dense forest. In that grassy open area, the lighter colors are lower densities. So what you can do is you can take from the land cover map, and we can create many different descriptions of the community for different features that are important for trying to figure out what type it is. So here's how that same area looks for its open grassy habitat. Here's for a single important species like scrub oak. You can see here with the forest, which has the larger window, that the boundaries are smoother, it extends longer because forests have more diffuse. In this case, we wanted to know of the forests, where are the really oaky forests? This was part of, and I'll show you later, important for us distinguishing between Central Northern Hardwood Forest and Pitch Pine Oak Forest. I know where's the oakiness. And here's a similar look at where are pitch pines? Where are they? And so once we had all of these sort of individual descriptions of important features that we've taken from the land cover data set and described it for the whole length of the pine bush, we basically came up with a set of rules for our community classes, and for each cell, based on their value in one or more of these rasters, we were able to assign them to a
first step we did, the easy step, was to get rid of sort of the miscellaneous. If you were open water in the land cover, you were going to be open water in the community. That shouldn't grow, that should stay the same. So for those, we just pulled those, they're exactly the same as in the land cover map. Ag fields and impervious surface. For the wetland community, in that wetland window map, if you had greater than 28%, because that was basically where we found it created the nicest border around wetlands without making them too patchy or making them extend too far away from where we knew the wetland was. And mowed lawn, again, you have greater than 28% mowed lawn, mowed lawn. Then we had our sort of open habitat types: pitch pine scrub oak barrens, pitch pine scrub oak thicket, northern Salmon Plains grassland. And these were based on two main things: that grass, scrub, oaky area, how much of your immediate surroundings was an open habitat. If it was greater than 34%, that put you into one of these three categories. And then whether or not it was a grassland, a thicket, or a scrub oak barrens was based on how dense the scrub oak was in that area. And this was something that we went back and forth with Greg and with Neil, people who knew the landscape, figure out what was kind of the pitch pine scrub oak concentration that constituted thicket. In this case, it was over 50, you were in a thicket. If it was between 12 and 50, it was a barrens, and if you had very little scrub oak, then you were in that open sandy grassland. And that left our forest types. So in this case, if you had forest of greater than 16% within your 50-meter radius, that put you in a foresty habitat. What kind of forest depended on your concentration of pines. In this case, if you had white pine and it was less than your pitch pine, that put you in appellation oak pine. If you had pitch pine, there were actually two ways you could get a pitch pine oak forest. You could either be foresty without a lot of white pine and with pitch pines, or you could be foresty and really oaky. Those were our two, after we went back and forth a couple of different ways of classifying the forest, that seemed to get a good description of where the pitch pine oak forest was. And to pull out the locust, our recessional southern hardwoods was if you were foresty and had over 60% locust cover. If you didn't fall into any of those categories, but you were foresty, you ended up in the recessional northern hardwoods. And if you didn't meet any of those, you were in the unclassified. Try to minimize as much as possible. So based on those rules, you would get a landscape like this, and based on all of its various features, it turns from a set of trees and a set of pixels into a map of communities. In this case, the dark teal is the pitch pine oak forest. The light blue is the wetlands. This kind of tannish is the pitch pine scrub oak barrens. The light green is the grassland, and these little deep oranges are the pitch pine scrub oak thickets. And this up here is recessional northern hardwoods. With you can see a little bit of mowed lawn up here in the top too. So this is what it looks like for the entire pine bush. So this is basically classifying any areas that met any of those criteria, no matter how small, which is important because, okay, I took Tim's land use raster, and here it is, here's our natural communities superimposed over that, so you can kind of see how the grasslands have, they've got some trees in them, and it basically smooths it out, right? You get more contiguous areas. Here it is by itself, and I thought, great, I'm done. And then they said, well, what about this? This can't really call that a forest. That is a little bit of a pitch pine scrub oak. Is that really a forest? And can't really count that as a grassland because it's pretty small. And this is a huge matrix of forest, but does that little bit really count as a northern hardwoods forest? And I wanted to be done. I said maybe, and they said no. So Greg Ender, our community ecologist, we went back to the community guidelines that Heritage has, and we went through a process that is called smoothing, or if you actually look at the function, it's called nibble in ArcGIS, which is precious. And basically, it was a process where we took patches that were too small to meet the requirements, and reclassified them to themselves their nearest neighbor. And much like
the initial classification, the order in which this happens is very important. So we got rid of everybody who was under an acre, right? You couldn't have anything under an acre. And then we started with grassland patches. We decided if you had to be at least 2 acres to be grassland. If you weren't, you nibble it away and it gets assigned to the community classes around it. Pitch pine scrub oak thickets were allowed to be 1 acre. Like they were the smallest one that we were allowed. Pitch pine scrub oak barrens had to be 2. And then any of those forest patches in a grassland or a barrens, they had to be at least 2 acres to be considered a patch of forest. And then within the matrix itself, which we sort of did separately to make sure that we kept the boundary between the grassland and the forest, we kept 2 acres for the successional southern hardwoods. Managing the locust is a priority, so we wanted to make sure that those still showed up in the community map. And then for all the other forest types, 5 acres was the minimum size. Pitch pine oak forest was the last, which meant that it had the biggest opportunity to grow. So you'll see that what the priority meant was that pitch pine oak forest tended to eat most of its neighbors. So here is our frizzle fry. So we start off with the grassland patches. This is a patch of successional northern Salmon Plains grassland. It's 6 acres, so it stays sufficiently big. However, this pitch pine scrub oak thicket is only 1/4 of an acre, so it's not going to make it to the next round of classification. This patch of pitch pine scrub oak barrens, 1.5 acres, doesn't make the cutoff. This little forest island, also too small. This piece of this little locust, way too small. And even this, now that we're in the forest matrix, within the forest matrix, this patch of northern hardwoods is less than 5 acres, so it's not going to be there. So what you get from our original community classification, anything that met those guidelines, to our smooth classification is much kind of more contiguous, less patchy, less speckled expanses of habitat. And so you can sort of see the changes here. This is the bright green, and then you can see in here where little patches of barrens got eaten. This used to be northern hardwoods. Gets rid of these kind of little bits of mowed lawn. These forest islands all went away. And again, what this did, these were the community types and their total area in the original classification. And after smoothing, you kind of got about 300 more acres of pitch pine oak forest. Your successional northern hardwoods didn't change that much. Lost a bit of grassland. Those little grassland patches in forest that were too small would get washed out. We kept the open water for the open water. We didn't want it to grow. One of the things that happens when you smooth is that things can expand, and it wouldn't make sense for a lake to expand. We also didn't want parking lots or ag fields to expand, so they were pretty much exactly the same. They came right out of the land use classification. And so you can, here's our, see that effect. Here's the initial community classification. And when you take away the areas that are too small, it becomes this more smooth, larger patches, fewer islands. And that would take any questions. I'd like to thank the commission, Neil, very helpful.
I've got a couple questions. Very nice, it could be very useful. It seems to me that one of the things that's going to enhance this is that you've got a method and a model now. Can you come back in 5 or 10 years and see the dynamics of the landscape? And I guess my question is, does the technology allow that? Or when you come back in 5 or 10 years, are you going to be able to replicate get the same kind of data sources? Is this going to interface with the software you're using? Or is that going to be just another nightmare that we have to overcome? Or will this really, it's just kind of your opinion. Do you think that's going to be easy to do in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
I mean, Tim's has good points for the photography. You need to get the same resolution aerial photographs, which is what makes it hard to backcast this, right? But in terms of the classification, it's the same exact size resolution. This is all in one script, so I can making those percent cover in the neighborhoods takes a bit, because it's a lot of cells, but it's totally compatible.
Yeah, I think that was part of the whole idea, was that, yes, if we can, rather than having an expert draw polygons where they think these types are, now if we can automate it, then we can say, all right, we'll run the same process, get the same answers, but are we changing in this force type or this force type over time? And it's a little bit more tractable in that sense. So absolutely, we also.
Sorry, do you see the descriptions, so the written English descriptions of different habitat types sort of beginning to ride a little bit more on what the algorithms spit out, and then you go back to the place and you're like, oh, I guess we need to adjust the description a little bit because this seems like it's...
I mean, the description's based on the ground. It's very different classifying it based on aerial imagery than on the ground descriptions. So, I mean, having read the guides, and I don't think the community ecologists are going to want to change how they classify a community with really great on the ground field data in order to match doing it remotely from half a meter resolution.
But that's why Greg was involved.
That's, yeah, exactly what I heard.
Right, so we had our chief ecologist involved to help us figure out and make that translation. And, you know, the descriptions include indicator, herbaceous species, and all these other things that we don't have, and high things are, we don't have information for, right? So we definitely, that translation needs to happen, and both of them inform each other, I think, and we might use this final mapping as our representation of those community types, yes.
But right now the mapping is following the description.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not the other.
Yeah, I think those descriptions are still the gold standard, and I wouldn't see it getting reversed.
I guess sorry.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to think like maybe doing this kind of mapping will change your perspective of what you might include in classified habitat type, and maybe that would be that.
Yeah.
Seems possible.
No, we should have that kind of feedback loop for sure, yeah.
I just had a quick question. How did you, and I'm sorry, maybe I missed this, how did you actually land on your final process of, you know, that this type is going to be less than, 1 acre, or this is going to be 5 acres? How did you come to that decision, and is that a statewide thing, or is that just,
The sizes were based on the community classification. The minimum size for these communities was already based on the existing community descriptions that are based on field observations on the ground. The only one that was maybe new was the Pitchpine Brook Thicket, which is kind of an Albany pine bush community that we wanted to make sure it was very small, but it's still considered, so it had a slightly, you could have slightly smaller patches of Pitchpine Brook Thicket. So I think you have that formally described. Yeah.
But I think the cutoffs also are depend on that expert opinion, but once we have Greg looking at the output and deciding, hey, you probably should go lower or higher or something like that, then we have it set that we can use again next time and still get this data.
Yeah. I mean, the cutoffs for the initial land cover to communities before the smoothing was based on looking at it and figuring out, I would present to them, okay, here's how it looks like with these cutoffs, and you show them the land cover map underneath, and the community ecologist would say whether or not maybe it needs to extend more or it needs to be more restricted, and so that would affect what those numbers were. It was kind of important when talking about it to get away from the idea that the percentage of cells in a neighborhood is very different than percent cover on the ground. So it was very sort of, those cutoffs are very specific to this kind of remote classification. They don't really translate to on the ground levels of governance.
Did you have another or not?
I can take it later, thanks.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for giving us the opportunity to share.
I guess now we're going to end the open session and go into executive session. So if I could have a motion to do just that.
Yes.
Second? All in favor?